So I'm going to spend the next sort of 25 minutes or so giving a very, very brief overview about intellectual property, the ideas of innovation and commercialization. So just pardon me, just as a overview of today. So there'll be an overview of the session, which I'm doing right now. And then talking about intellectual property, again, very, very brief overview. People spend lifetimes on any one particular aspect of intellectual property. I'm going to spend probably 10 minutes over all of them, so not doing it complete justice. Then I'm going to describe an idea translation model for commercialization. So it's not necessarily something for making a commercial or having commercial revenue, but a way of getting your ideas out into the world. And then spend a few minutes talking about generally what resources and assistance that is available at different institutions and through a number of the funding agencies to help develop IP and develop ideas. And then I'm looking forward to our question and answers and a discussion at the end. So my legal counsel that I work with says that I really need to include this, which is a legal disclaimer. It says, I'm not a lawyer and this is not legal advice. So if you have particular IP questions that you need some legal advice for, so is this something that I should patent? What is this? That is something that whenever I have a question like that, I go to my IP lawyers who are able to give legal advice. So I'm happy to talk about this in terms of in very broad strokes, but please don't take, please get, I guess the bottom line is, get a second opinion. I can give you an opinion, but I can't give you legal advice. So with that out of the way, I'd like to start with talking about intellectual property. So to be a bit dry about it, the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, or CIPO, describes intellectual property as a form of creative effort that can be protected through a patent, trademark, copyright, industrial design, or integrated circuit topography. That's a lot in there. Let's just focus on the things that are things that I've actually worked with in my role at Brock. And these types of IP would be patents, copyrights, trademarks, industrial designs, and trade secrets. And I think what is common about this, and I underlined in the previous slide, is that there are ways of protecting all these different types of IP. So I'll speak briefly about each of these different types because these are the types you as researchers may have already encountered or may encounter. So first of all, we'll start off with patents. And patents are an official record of an invention. And an invention, so what's an invention? Let's describe it as anything that's new and useful. It can be a machine, it could be a process, it could be something more broadly called a composition of matter, which is another way of saying a thing or a molecule. Or it could be a useful improvement to any of those things, quite literally, a better mousetrap. But one thing that's common about this is that, or that's essential about an invention, in order for it to be patentable, is an invention must be useful, it has to be unique, and it has to be non-obvious. So useful, it's got to do something. It can't just be, I can't think of a great example, but it has to do something. It has to be unique in that it has to be something that hasn't been invented before. It could be an improvement on something that already exists, but it has to be something that is novel. And that's another word that gets used quite often in patenting is novel. And also something is not obvious. So in that idea of Newton, it's not necessarily standing on the shoulders of giants. It's not the next obvious step, but it is something that is unexpected. The world thought you should use this method for one thing, but really it works better for something else. And it's that idea of non-obvious. And so what does a patent give you? A patent really is about protection, and that is the common thread in IP. And protection gives you as the owner of that IP, or in this case, the patent, the exclusive right to use that invention or that novel bit of thing that you created. It also gives you the right to license it to somebody else. Also, I guess conversely, it excludes others from using that invention. So it gives you exclusive use of that particular invention and gives you the right to prosecute if somebody is deciding to steal your idea that has been patented. And it gives you that right to do it for a specific term. And a patent has an expiry. In depending on jurisdiction, it's generally 20 years from the filing date of your patent. Patents are also specific for geographical areas. So when you're thinking about when you're filing a patent, think about where that patent will be most useful. Where are you going to use this patent? Is this something that you've got a great market in Brazil? So file a patent in Brazil. You're doing manufacturing in China, file a patent in China. Because if you file a patent only in Canada, it protects you from infringement or patent infringement or other people using that idea in Canada, but not in the United States. So it's a way of thinking about what jurisdictions, what geographical areas, and that's what patents do as well. Patents are also public, so eventually they do get published. And so if you're worried about competitors seeing this, that you may want to think about another form of protection, because they do become public and others can see your work. I think one of the big downsides, especially in universities, is patents are very expensive and it's a long process. So to get a patent from filing to where it's granted, with all the back and forth between the patent lawyers and the patent offices, which is a process of prosecution, can be tens of thousands of dollars. And so when it can take years, it doesn't preclude you from using your invention in the meantime, but just know that to get that point of patent granting where you are assured officially that your invention is unique in your jurisdiction, it can be a long and really expensive process. And generally from a market point of view, we think of, is this idea that you're thinking of patenting, is it something that's going to generate probably $1 million a year, then it's worth patenting. If it's going to be less, then maybe think about other ways of protecting that IP. So moving on to copyright, and copyright is something you're probably familiar with as researchers already. And it's a way of providing protection for original substantial works. And these works could be literary, musical, dramatic, artistic. So they include performances, sound recordings, communication signals, like that's sort of a broad way to describe a way of communicating any of these types of works. So I think this is something that is, I think, very common in the academic world, is the idea of copyright. And copyright is automatic. Once you create it, the copyright vests with you, it is yours. There's no registration required in Canada, although copyrights can be registered for additional official protection, but really copyright is yours. It generally lasts the lifetime of the creator and for an additional 50 years thereafter. And like a patent, the copyright grants the owner or the creator the sole right to produce or reproduce that work. I think an important thing about a copyright here is that it protects the expression of the idea. So the paper that you wrote, but it doesn't protect the idea itself. You can't have somebody read your paper and think, what a great idea, steal that idea and make it their own. It only protects the actual expression of that idea. So that's just something to keep in mind about copyrights. And in the commercial frame, copyright works are something that do have commercial value. Just as an example, down the road from us at Brock is the McMaster Industry Liaison Office in Hamilton, serving McMaster University. And they have a number of quality of life questionnaires which are copyrighted works that they are licensing for use by companies or for whomever would like to use it. So there's some examples here of inflammatory bowel disease questionnaires, chronic respiratory disease questionnaires, chronic heart failure questionnaires. So these are all copyrighted works that were produced through the research at McMaster and then are being used in the world through a licensing from McMaster Industry Liaison Office. Trademarks, another type of IP, and we're surrounded by them. So it's a sign that's used as an indicator for source of origin of goods or services. In other words, a brand identifier. Could be a word, could be a logo, could be a shape. It could be an invented word like the word Kodak, or something that's arbitrary like Apple. And it's something that you adopt or register, so go through an official registration process. What I find sort of interesting about trademarks is, and this was going through a process where we were trying to trademark something, is a trademark can't be too on the nose or descriptive. So you couldn't trademark Dave's wine cooler, but you could trademark Dave's wine coolorama. So something like that. It's got to be an invented word, something that is not perfectly descriptive. Is how you would trademark something again, or use something more visual like a logo. Industrial designs is also thought of as an industrial design patent. It is protection for a specific original visual aspects of the appearance of product. So it's not the use, which would be much more under the regular patent, but it's the shape or the appearance. So classic example here is that Coke bottle shape, and that's an industrial design patent, or the design of a car like this Porsche here. And there is a registration process, and again, this grants exclusive rights to do this. I mean, a great example of this industrial design protection is where Samsung was found to have taken the industrial design, the industrial dress from the Apple iPhone, and that it was a little bit too close to Apple's original industrial design. So finally, I'd talk about a trade secret. And trade secret is in the commercial sense, valuable commercial information which a person has taken reasonable measures to protect. So could be locking it away in a safe, using only non-disclosure agreements, so keeping it out of the public eyes. And trade secrets can include anything like new technologies, designs for new products, recipes like the 11 herbs and spices for the Colonel's secret recipe, could be data or any other confidential information. So this is an alternative to patenting. If it's something that you can keep a trade secret, it's something that can be potentially kept for as long as you can keep a secret. So there is no formal registration process. And to gain benefit from trade secret protection, there has to be a commercial benefit, and there's got to be a process where you're keeping that information confidential. And as I mentioned, like a patent, a trade secret can potentially last forever. So it really, it's the question of how long can you keep a secret? These are a few more examples of products which have enjoyed the benefit of trade secrets. So just before moving to the next section, I thought a bit of a thought experiment of going through some examples that I've encountered and thinking, what kinds of IP are these? How would these be protected? So first here is a code, essentially the computer code for an app for taking laboratory notes. In thinking about this, the code can be written out, and so that's copyrightable. But if the code is something that no one ever necessarily sees, it could also be kept as a trade secret. So just launching the app without publishing the code. A natural product that can be used to help regrow hair. This is a bit of a trick question because natural products themselves can't be patented. So isolating something from a plant, for example, is not something that could be patented, but what can be patented is a novel use for that natural product. So in this case, it could be a process where patenting the novel use of a natural product for regrowing hair. It was a novel idea, unique, nobody thought of this before, and that could be patented. A fine art book, that's, I think, fairly straightforward as a copyright. And another example that we've used at Brock is a design for a new type of wine glass, and that's something that we are in the midst of applying for an industrial design patent for. Now move on to the next section, which is this idea of you have ideas or IP, how to get it out into the world. And that's where I'm going to present a model for innovation and commercialization with the asterisk that it's not necessarily commercial. This is not necessarily about making money. So in this section, I'm going to talk about the idea of translating an idea into practice through this commercialization with the asterisks model. It's a 5-step model. And then I'll work through the example. And then I'm going to ask you to apply the model to your own work and think about it that way. So and just to reiterate about commercialization is with the asterisks, I see it really as mobilizing research to make an impact. And there are lots of different ways to make an impact. It could be financial or economic. So do you have $1 million idea? Is this $1 billion idea? So there's a potential financial or economic benefit or impact that your idea can have. But the other ways, is there a social or societal impact? Will it just make someone's life better? And Or an academic impact, is this give, as a researcher, ability to publish more papers, as a student, learn more, train more, go further through your academic career? Or does it confer some reputational impact? For example, doing good works is this brings some additional reputation to you, to your research group, or to your institution. So this is the way I like to think about commercialization. It's not just about making money, but really it's about making a research impact. So let's move into the model. I see this as a kind of five-step model, which is first, and it's defined by asking a series of questions about each of these steps. So the first is, what is the problem? What is the problem you've identified in the world that needs some kind of solution? And then a solution through your research. Who is the customer, or the receptor, or the partner, the recipient of this solution? Who can actually use it? What is eventually going to be the impact of the solution? Is, what is the market? What's the potential revenue, or what's the potential impact? And then finally, how do you actually get to that person? What is the path to market? So I'll go through each of these steps with those questions. So first of all, what is the problem? What is that problem you identified? Another way to describe it is, what is the unmet need in the market? So is that something you can apply to your research? So what is your research addressing? What is that potential problem? And then from the solution point of view, how is that problem being solved right now? And then you, as a researcher, how are you applying, what is your unique solution? And if you're thinking in more business terms, what is the value proposition? And how is your unique solution better or different than the current solutions? And then finally, if you're thinking in this more commercial terms, is intellectual property protection for your solution something that's necessary or appropriate? Coming to the customer, receptor, or the partners, is who's actually going to use the solution? So you've identified the problem, you've got a solution. So who could use this? If you get into their hands, how will it make an impact on them? Who's your customer? Who's the receptor? Who's the audience? Or who's the partner who can use this? Thinking about market or revenue or impact. So what's the size? If you're thinking in financial terms, what's the size or value of the market? What's the potential revenue? Or what's the potential impact of this idea of the solution? I think the bottom line for answering all these questions is all about market research. And there's lots of ways of going about doing that, from asking your potential customer what they're looking for, and to hiring firms to actually do it for you. Then finally, what is the path to market? How do you actually reach those receptors? How much will it cost? How are you going to fund it? Do you have a team to make it happen? Are there regulatory hurdles to get in the way? Do you have what's called freedom to operate? Or does somebody else have some other IP that you need to acquire in order to get your solution to market? Then what's your overall strategy? So these are all questions as a founder of an idea, or getting an idea, there is something to address. I'd like to illustrate this model with an example from research that happened, that was from here at Brock. Now, when taking X-rays of potential people who are at risk of lung cancer, there are lung nodules that appear, which are small spots, which are small growths throughout the lungs. A small fraction of these nodules could be cancerous. You probably have a lot of nodules in your lungs right now, non-cancerous. But there's a chance, if you're at high risk of developing cancer, there's a fraction of these that might be cancerous. But the question of how to identify this is a tricky one, because one way to identify whether or not a nodule is cancerous is to do a biopsy, but that's a painful, expensive process. So is there a better way? So let's run through this example using, or run through the model using this as an example. So I guess the problem is, how can lung cancer be diagnosed better? How can these multitude of lung nodules be better identified as being potentially cancerous, and thereby possibly minimizing the number of biopsies performed? Well, our researcher, Dr. Martin Tamamagi, along with his co-workers at the University of British Columbia and the BC Cancer Agency, worked on an algorithm that is based on a number of clinical factors, as well as size and location of these lung nodules, that made finding these potentially cancerous ones a little bit easier, because it identified those lung nodules that were a higher chance of being cancerous. So that was their solution to better diagnosing lung cancer. And so I'm thinking about who are the customers or the receptors. And when Dr. Tamamagi came to us, we did some market research and we found that the best potential customer were those companies that were already involved with taking that imaging and diagnosing issues from X-rays. And those are companies that had CT imaging software, medical imaging analysis. And from a market point of view, there's potential revenue in licensing this to these CT companies, with the ultimate impact of having better lung cancer diagnosis, improved patient care, and better patient outcomes. And the way we got to market was not having to worry about the regulatory issues, but really licensing this know-how, this software, this algorithm of the model to these medical imaging companies. And then they were able to offer it to their customers. So this is a commercialization exercise I'd ask you to think about with your own research. And really it's to answer the three first questions, which once you answer these, you're 90% of the way there, I think, of getting your idea translated, which is, what is the problem? Can you articulate what the problem that your research is addressing? What is your unique solution? And then who is your audience or your customer? And I'll reiterate, this doesn't have to be a commercial application, but think about in terms of impact and answer these questions. And this will, I think, helps kind of see how your research can be translated. So we'll move to the last couple minutes for some of the resources that are available for assistance with IP and commercialization. So the internet is a terrible and wonderful place at once. So these are some of the public resources that are available. And by the way, don't rush to scribble all this down. I'm happy to make these slides available to you afterwards. And I can send to Caitlin as a PDF. So feel free. So you don't need to write all these down. So there are public resources available through the Canadian Intellectual Property Office. Has a nice overview of IP and some ways of protecting it. Turns out yesterday was World IP Day, so happy belated World IP Day. As Tech Transfer Office staff, I don't know what we gave each other, probably licensing agreements, something like that. And then the Michelson Institute for Intellectual Property has a really nice overview. It's very US-centric, but it's a terrific series of educational sessions that has a great overview of IP. But as researchers and institutions, there are lots of resources. And so I would look for the Innovation or Technology Transfer Office. They can help with, they're populated with folks like me. They can help with additional avenues for research impact, talking about your research for IP protection, avenues of potential commercialization with an asterisk, and as well as partnership opportunities, how to partner with those in the outside world to help develop those opportunities to make that impact. And another great resource are campus incubators or entrepreneur centers. I know here at Brock, we've got the Brock Link, which is the hub of entrepreneurship on campus. And there are lots of resources and assistance available there. And just to show you, I know that there are researchers here from a number of different institutions. And so these are just some links to the offices that do this work at a few of the different campuses that I know are involved with this much larger project. I believe the Université de Montréal is undergoing some changes, but that's the latest link that I have. I also mentioned support for collaborations, and that's something that these offices can help with. And that's tapping into the potential funding sources, like through SSHRC, through NSERC. Here in Ontario, we've got Ontario Centre for Innovation, and then also the federal program MyTax. It's a great way of being able to fund collaborations between researchers at universities and industry members or community members. If you're a graduate student, I highly recommend you look into the MyTax program, the MyTax Accelerate program. What it does is it provides support for internships to do a research project to benefit a partner. And so it's getting that real world, that sort of hands-on research experience that can make an impact on a partner. And MyTax is expanded their reach from not just working with for-profit companies, but also not-for-profit companies. So there's lots of ways in order to support these types of collaborations, and talk to your innovation office or your tech transfer office about that. And with that, I'd be happy to have questions or start the discussion here.
Thank you so much, Bradley, for your presentation. Yeah, with that, I'd like to open the question and answer period. Please note that the question and answer period will be recorded. During the Q&A, if you have a question you'd like to ask our speaker, just indicate that you have a question in the chat, and I'll invite you to unmute your mic and deliver your question orally. If you don't want to do that, you could also deliver your question using the Zoom meeting chat, and I would read your question for you in that case.
Great. Well, I'm happy if there aren't any questions right away. Oh, sorry. I see Sid's got one, but
there we go. Thanks, Brad. That was great. You raised some questions I've been thinking about for a long time and helping to sort out. As an academic, one of the main concerns we have is how to protect ourselves. So let's say I develop a clinical questionnaire that are useful. I don't care if other people use it. In fact, as an academic, I want other people to use it.
Right.
But I want somebody to copyright it and stop me from using it.
Right.
So let me just finish. This seems like the same thing applies to, let's say I make a secret recipe or an app code, and you said, well, you could protect yourself by just keeping it as secret and not telling anybody. And my understanding is Kleenex still has they never patented how it makes it pop up all the time. That worked then better than everyone else, and they've managed.
Sure.
But what if somebody else discovers how to do it on their own? Could they then patent it or copyright it so Kleenex would have to stop using it? That kind of thing. Who gets priority?
Yes.
And if you go to patent something, you said it can take some time, years. What if somebody else comes up with it in between? Has your registration of the patent protected you like a copyright would? So
sure.
There you go.
Okay, no, happy to address those. I think I've got some guidance on those. So let's start with the idea of protecting yourself as a questionnaire. So I'll be frank, I'm not a copyright expert. If you do want some more specific guidance around copyrights, Vitushan Vijay Kumaran in our office, our legal counsel, is terrific. He's an IP lawyer, so he's quite specialized in the copyright. Copyright. My understanding is the copyright is when you create it, it becomes yours. So if you have evidence, you've got notes, you've got ways that you've created something like a questionnaire, it becomes yours. So if somebody else starts using it, you have claim to be able to stop them from using it. It's just a matter at that point of resources. So yeah, that's always a limitation of like how much do you want to do that.
And just on that, I was told one point, the way to do that is to seal it in an envelope and have it notarized, and then put a date stamped on it, and it's sealed. So
sure. Yeah, that's one way. So at least you've got some kind of record of it. There is a process where you can register a copyright. It doesn't cost very much in Canada, but it is something that you can be done. So if you're concerned, you can do a registration of that as a copyright. Then you've got an official record of that.
And does that work internationally then?
That I'm not as sure of. So I can't answer that of how, what the reciprocal copywriting rights are if it has the same kind of jurisdiction. But that's a really good question. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to find out about that. But definitely follow up with me or with the
I don't have any,
about that.
And I'm supposed to be retiring, so I'm not supposed
to. That's right.
But I've always wondered about that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Charles Dickens, who had his stuff printed up, published by pirates in the United States.
Right.
And he lost income.
Exactly. And that may be a case where, if there is a claim on intellectual property, he just may not have had the resources to sick lawyers on those in the US to stop them. or there may have been if there was copyright protection there as well. So yeah, that's something I'm not sure about, the kind of global jurisdictions of copyright. Now I'll move on to your other two questions. One about the idea of Kleenex. So you invent something, you keep it a trade secret, that somebody comes along and they, in parallel, get the same idea and they patent it. You're out of luck if you're Kleenex in that case. It really, and that's where the decision of what is your best way to protect it is something, because you can think of this in terms of inventions, you are in competition with others potentially. And it is that idea of first to patent. But if it's something that you can keep as a trade secret, like the formula to Coke, they've successfully kept that as a trade secret. You can keep that forever, but a patent eventually expires. So it eventually expires and becomes public anyway. So it's really, there is that risk in patenting, is if you keep something a trade secret, that somebody else can come in and scoop what you have patented and take it as their own.
And stop you from using it.
And stop you from doing it. Because if you go, the idea is you go to patent that subsequently, they, the patent office in the prosecution process, they do something called a prior art search, right. And they find that patent of your competitor have already patented that, and you're out of luck. So there is that process.
Even if you've been doing it for years. Okay.
Exactly. And then that goes to your final question about patenting. So patenting is a long process, but the important part of patenting is getting what's called a priority date. So as soon as you have an idea or enough to patent, you file that with the patent office, and that's your date. So regardless of how long the process takes, which can take years after that, and there are times that we've deliberately slowed down that process because it doesn't affect the priority, but it just spreads out the costs. That it's the date of filing, which is the important part, not the date of grant. And there's some interesting quirks around filing in that in the United States, there's an idea of you can file a provisional patent. So you get if you have an idea, you can file a quick and dirty patent and you get a priority date. And then your filing is secret for a year. Oh. It's not published. Generally, patents aren't published until I think 18 months after the filing. But a provisional patent is held confidential. You can't search it. You can't find out that it exists until a year after the filing of it. At the end of the year, you're asked to convert your patent into a full patent. And at that point, you can add some additional data, which in each additional data or additional invention gets the priority date of when you file it. If someone else comes and files something identical to that after your priority date, they're out of luck. So it really is your the idea first to file.
Right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next question we have is from Dr. Cooperman. Victor, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you so much, Brad. This is very informative, and much of this is new to me. Oh, so my question will probably not be well formed. It might be long-winded, but
that's fine.
In every grant application that we submit, we have to define the value proposition. We have to define who is this research good for, and typically it's not just for the academy. It should also be formulated in terms of societal or economic or some other impact. So what I'm wondering also about myself is that if much of our work is guided by something that we've already defined in terms of value proposition, we've defined the customers, right. Why is it the case that so little of our work makes it through the intellectual property process? And I don't have a good answer to that. It's probably a question to myself. But I think what I'm personally missing is the knowledge or expertise in market research.
Okay.
So I can project that something might be useful for the secondary or education, or right. Something might have clinical implications. Mm-hmm. But to make this extra step and actually find out whether it's useful or who right. will actually benefit from it. Yes. In practice, and how to make this happen. This is where the breakdown in my personal pipeline is. So any comment on this will be appreciated.
Absolutely. Well, and that's where I've seen, I wouldn't call it difficulties, but some of those tensions as as a researcher, your job is to create the knowledge, not necessarily be the, I'll use the word hesitantly, but be the business person to get it to the market. And that's where I would suggest talking to your institution's innovation or technology transfer office, because they'd be able to help with that process. That's really what their job is to do, to help with that. I should ask, which university are you at?
Oh, I'm at McMaster.
Oh, you're McMaster. Okay, great. So I would the folks at Milo, or at the McMaster Industry Liaison Office, the ones to talk to, I would suggest having a chat with somebody there, and they can help with that whole process. So if you have an idea of how to potentially get that to market, or who might benefit from it, they may be able to help you with that process of getting it there. And there are, because as an academic, that's not necessarily your bent, is to like, how am I going to make money from this, or how do I find the market? And that's where universities have tried to find folks like me and my colleagues at McMaster to help with that process. So that would be my suggestion for at least knocking that some loose. They may be able to provide some guidance as well. So if it's not something that they have the capacity to do, they will be able to point you in the right direction in order to get there. And then for your second part of the around market research, I think this is really important. And market research is something, again, that the offices like the innovation offices should be able to help with market research. We struggle with it because market research is often something that is it takes specialized knowledge or specialized expertise to really understand the market. There are, that being said, there are also market research reports that are available. So there are ways of, I don't know if you've ever done a search for market size for something, there are a number of market research reports come up, and they're thousands and thousands of dollars, but there are ways and there are memberships in order to get access to some of those. So again, the folks at Milo may be able to help with that market research idea. I've always started my market research just going through using Google to figure out market size and that sort of thing, and then use that as a start and then be able to refine it. If you're feeling particularly entrepreneurial, you could even talk to the more entrepreneur centers. I think it's called the Forge at McMaster. They may have some ideas. There's also a regional innovation center that's located in that area called Innovation Factory. And they have access to the market research reports and market research expertise. So if you're thinking of this in terms of a startup company or a startup idea, they can help with that. But I would start with Milo, and they should be able to help with those different aspects. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Great. So we have actually a long list of questions now, but we'll just have Gary join in. He has a question in follow up to Victor's.
Sure.
Thank you. I had a very, very quick follow up. Brad, do you have any advice for given the advice that you gave to Victor, what about the problem of humanity? Let's say take humanities researchers, or often departments of linguistics are not in faculties of science, and they want to go to these offices, and they walk through the front door, and their first thought is, this isn't for me. They did not build this place for researchers like me.
Yes.
So they're going to ask me how much money, and I'm going to say something, oh, I don't know, like I think maybe enough to hire a couple of researchers.
Right. Well, that is excellent, and I would suggest, yes, it is intimidating, because the technology transfer offices were really built on that idea of technology, and there have been historically very science and technology focused, but examples like those questionnaires at McMaster are really showing that there is value, and not just monetary value, but that idea of impact value that can come from the humanities as well, not looking just at hard sciences. So I would suggest that it's more of a problem of who the office themselves, if they're turning you away, but they should be a bit creative and thinking, here's a researcher who's got a great idea that can make an impact. How can we help them? And certainly that's the attitude that I take here at Brock, is how can we help? And how can we help make that kind of that leap or that translation, or help with market research, or even just talking through some of these ideas. So I suggest those colleagues should be able to do the same thing and apply those techniques that are used for the more STEM side of things, to be able to use those on the humanities side. That being said, I'm also seeing funders who are moving in the direction of funding that type of translational research. So when I started probably 8+ years ago, the focus on the funding side, so that was NSERC and OCI, was they were the ones who were funding this collaborative research. So that as an industry partner with a researcher, there's a lot of chemistry projects that we were doing. But over the years, I've really seen that expand. So now SSHRC offers the SSHRC Partnership Engage Grant, which is a short-term grant that funds research that is in the benefit of a partner. And that is very much in the SSHRC side of things. MyTax also has expanded. They started as funding STEM collaborations or STEM internships, and they've expanded to work with, to fund nonprofit, or work with nonprofit institutions. We've done the YMCA. We've done, we're working with a group, an autism group, I think in the GTA, for funding these collaborations with nonprofits. So we're seeing the funders recognize that that's an opportunity as well. So I think that's moving. So I guess my advice would be, try not to be intimidated, and don't take no for an answer, and find the right person in those offices, because there are people there who can help.
Thanks so much.
Okay, the next question is has been delivered on the chat. I'm just gonna read out the whole comment. It says,
sure.
Dear Brad, hi, this is Tim from Cyprus, Europe. Many thanks for a very informative talk. Several of our collaborations are international today. Some discussion of the nexus of foreign and international intellectual property law would be more than welcome.
Great. Well, I can talk a little bit about the patent side of international intellectual property law. But I'm afraid, as you know, Sid's question earlier, I'm not as familiar with the copyright side of things, or the other types of IP, how that's regulated in different parts of the world. I guess ultimately, my suggestion would be is to talk to the offices, like, I harp on this a lot, but it really is the technology transfer offices, because they would be familiar with how to do international agreements around intellectual property, and navigate the differences between different jurisdictions. And certainly I would, you know, if someone came to me here at Brock saying, I've got a collaborator in the UK or in Cyprus or in the EU, how can we navigate this? And we would figure it out. And to be able to come up with those agreements and understand what the different rules are. That being said, I can talk very briefly about patenting in the internationally. One thing I didn't touch on is something called a PCT. So if you have an idea or an invention idea, you can file something under a PCT, which is the Patent Cooperation Treaty. What it is I described that idea of a provisional patent being filed in the United States. A PCT is like filing a patent in the whole world. So you file it with as what's called a PCT, and what that does is it reserves your idea in all of the jurisdictions that have signed on to the PCT, and I think it's like 200 and something plus countries that have signed on to the PCT. And then after a period of time, you are asked by the office, or I guess where you file the PCT with, when you want to go into the national phase. So you decide what jurisdictions are then important to you, that you can then choose to pick and choose what areas of the world are important to protect that patented or patentable IP in. Could be the US, Canada, EU, or particular countries, and that's where you decide that. But that initial filing can be through a PCT, which gives you the time and space to figure out what jurisdictions those can be in. And that's through one single instrument of that, filing that PCT patent. It's a little bit more expensive, but if it's something that where you're working internationally, work with international collaborators, it's a nice way of being able to let your future selves decide where you need to be specific about geographic ideas and markets, but initially you don't have to be. I hope that's helpful.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Right.
The next question we have is from Javon Luke. Javon, okay. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, Brad. My question is it possible that you can explain more about MyTax and everything you know about it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So MyTax, let me see, they have a number of different programs. They are a Canadian federally funded program. And the program we use most often is called Accelerate. It's a really flexible program. It's designed to provide graduate students with internship opportunities. So it's a graduate student who has a potential research project with a company or with a nonprofit organization. And the way it works is there's a research project. The research project can be a flexible length. MyTax tends to think in terms of time units. So 4 to 6 month time units is a unit of MyTax. And for every unit, the company or the partner is expected to contribute $7,500. And then MyTax matches that with $7,500 to make up a $15,000 internship for that 4-month period, of which a minimum of $10,000 goes to a stipend to the graduate student. And there's additional, then it's $5,000 that are flex funds, which could be used for additional stipend or for research expenses. And as a graduate student, there can be multiple units of time. And that really, how many units you can have depends on the type of graduate student you are, or it's also available to postdocs as well. So it can be, I'm afraid I forget the number of units. I think it's about 2 years for a master's student and up 3 for a postdoc or a PhD student. But it is generally fairly flexible. And the idea is that it is an internship. So a graduate student or graduate student or postdoc is expected to spend 50% of their time with the partner working on this partner project. And so as a graduate student, you get direct like hands-on experience working with the company or with the partner. And the partner at the same time gets to experience you as a graduate student and your work. And the idea is potentially looking at you as a hire. And it's almost like it's like a graduate student co-op term, but you're doing a research project. So that's the main program that we use for MyTax. But I would suggest going to their website because they do have other programs. As postdocs, there are competitive programs which add some additional training, some additional career training on top of that. There are also international opportunities. So being able to go overseas for graduate research work as well. I think MyTax also publishes some of the opportunities that are available. So if you're a graduate student or if you're a company, you can post there and to try and do some matchmaking. So it's a great program. I think in the federal budget just received some additional funding, and we're certainly really busy with it right now. I hope that helps.
Yeah. So I'm intending to graduate in October. Is this a program that's still available to me?
If you're graduating from as a graduate student?
Yes.
Okay. Unfortunately, it's only available to full-time graduate students or postdocs. So for programs that are after graduation, I don't know of MyTax programs that are available after graduation. There are other programs if you're looking to join potentially a company that will fund the company for new graduate salaries. So that's through the National Research Council. But that's something that is more worked on the company side of things. But unfortunately, MyTax is really available only to full-time graduate students. But if you're planning to graduate in October, the time would be a little bit tight for a 4-month opportunity, unfortunately. But yeah, certainly think about it if there's a way to make it work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, there's another question in the chat from Jordan Gallant. He asks, do you know of any examples of MyTax collaborations involving students from social sciences?
Yes, I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. I know we facilitate, I'm sorry, I don't remember the specifics. I remember we've done one with a student who was working in political science. And we've done one with, again, YMCA, and that was more, it wasn't kinesiology, but it was in applied health sciences, which isn't exactly social sciences, but we're working on one with someone from applied disability studies, again, with a group, an autism group in the GTA. So there is a lot of flexibility around the subject matter. As long as it's a research project, as long as you have an eligible partner, that's something we can entertain.
Okay, great. So we're fairly close to the end of our time together. So maybe I will just close it at this point.
Sure.
Thank you everybody for joining. I'll ask Gary to close if he's able to.
Oh, I want to say, so Brad, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and for opening so many doors for all of us. I learned a lot, and I'm sure our colleagues did as well. So thank you again, and welcome to the group.
Thank you very much. No, again, really appreciate the invitation and appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone. And if I know we didn't get through all the questions, but if you have anything specific, feel free to, I think, email Caitlin. Was that right, Caitlin? And she'll pass it on, and I can try and help however I can.
Yes, that's right. If you send, if you think of a question that you have at this point, you could email it to the wordsintheworldgrant@gmail.com address, the email that we send out open office hours communications with. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We do have another open office hours building bridges session coming up in I think 3 weeks. So we'll keep you updated about that. If you joined here and you're not currently on the open office hours mailing list, just go ahead over to our website, wordsintheworld.ca, and there is an option there to join the mailing list, and we'll make sure that you are kept aware of all of our plans and upcoming events. So thank you so much.
Great.
Bye-bye.